Well, good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and start our regularly stated meeting for September 28th. I'd like to welcome everyone that's here. Thank you for being here. Welcome the board. Thank you for being here this morning. Let's start with the roll call. Candy?
All members that are here are at Hilltop. We'll start with Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt.
Yes.
Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Roll call is complete.
Very good. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Any discussion, additions, or corrections? Candy, please click the vote.
We'll start the voting with Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt.
Yes.
Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Moving on to Wolf Creek Elementary School building presentation. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, we have Mrs. Beth Cooper, and she's got some teachers, and we're going to turn it over to Mrs. Cooper.
So, welcome to our Wolf Creek Elementary School Board meeting. This is just one of many, many adaptations that we make this year because of COVID. And so, I knew that you were interested in how that is going for us, so that's basically going to be the topic of our agenda today. I'm going to talk a little bit this morning on how we prepared for school to begin, and then you can see there are some teachers here who are going to share their experiences with you. And then the last couple of weeks I went out and took lots of pictures, and I put them into a slide presentation for you, because my goal is that by the end of the day, our presentation, that you feel like you've been able to be in our school and really see what the elementary school day looks like. So I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about how we prepared for this school year to begin. Back in July, the 4 elementary principals started meeting almost every day. We met for dozens of hours, and we worked through those documents that we had at the time, and we kind of built our new logistics and the accommodations we would need to meet for COVID. And honestly, it took a lot of time, and it might have been faster just to do it on our own, but we met together for a couple of reasons. One is we knew 4 heads were better than 1, and we were very committed to making this school year as safe as possible as it could be for everybody. And also because we knew that having some continuity across our district would be very important to our district, and we also thought it would be really reassuring to our families. So we spent most of those days before the teachers came back just working through those documents and developing those processes. Now, once the teachers came back, we really hit the ground running. We had 12 days, which was something we've never had before, but I will tell you, we used every single bit of that time. Now, by the time the kids actually came, I think we had kind of ratcheted ourselves up, and I don't know if we could have done another day because we were so ready to see them. But I'm going to go ahead and just list some of the things we did, because I think that you will be impressed by everything that we worked on. We had multiple trainings about COVID adaptations and accommodations, including one specifically on how to prepare for contact tracing. We had one specifically with our school nurse who kind of approached it from the health standpoint, and we even had our custodial supervisor, Todd Brown, come and met with the whole staff to talk about how to properly sanitize, because everybody in our building is cleaning this year. On the instructional side, each of our teachers spent 7.5 hours of training with our instructional coaches, talking about effective instruction and keeping students engaged in an on-site but socially distanced classroom, because we knew that would be challenging. We also, in that time, covered how to keep children engaged in a virtual setting. One of the goals that the principals set together in July is that if we needed to go to remote, that we would be ready. When this happened to us in March, I think we actually did an amazing job kind of doing crisis teaching and learning. And when I've talked to parents on the phone about it over the summer, I kind of likened it to you come across the accident on the road, you jump out of your car, and you just start doing the best you can. And you try to do everything you can to be effective. But we knew that if we had to do this again in the fall, that we would need a more polished and effective way to present remote instruction. So we actually spent many, many hours preparing for that. They did the training with the coaches, which was amazing. Those 4 coaches spent a lot of time this summer putting those modules together, but they also spent additional time mastering platforms that would help them to deliver lessons if they needed to. They worked hard on mastering Google Classroom, Seesaw, and Nearpod. Those are some of the platforms that we chose that we thought would be effective for elementary school students if, in fact, they needed to be learning from home this year. So we did that, but we also didn't ignore the goals that we had set previously for the school year. So we did a half day of training on dyslexia. We did a training on our new resource, Sunday, which is a new reading resource that we have put in to kind of support the Anchor Resource of Wonders that we have. Sunday is a structured systemic reading program that really emphasizes and strengthens that phonics and spelling, which we kind of felt like we needed, and so far that's going really great. I wish I had more time. We could do a whole presentation just on how that's going. We also, our SPED team spent an entire day learning. This just so happened to be the year we introduced a new SPED information system, and so they spent an entire day learning that information system and have been kind of grappling with that newness along with all of the other challenges they have this year, and so they definitely deserve a little shout out for that this morning. Mrs. Markham did a whole hour on bully prevention, which is part of our required training. We had additional trainings from HR that we always do, including emergency safety intervention, the McKinney-Vento Homeless Children Act, sexual harassment, bloodborne pathogens, mandated abuse training, all those things that we always wrap into the beginning of the school year. And then we also, we carved out a few hours because we didn't want to lose the momentum of the PLC work that we had been doing. So our teachers met with their teams. Most of our teams, our grade level teams at Wolf Creek have at least one new member this year. So we spent that time reviewing our norms, adopting new norms if we wanted to, and then we brought them up to speed in all the work we did last year because, as you all know, that was a big commitment that we tackled last year, and I don't want that to be lost. So they spent some hours together as a team, bringing them up to speed, talking about the math standards that they unpacked. If a team wasn't new, they went ahead and started moving forward into the work we want to accomplish this year. So a lot of professional learning happened in those 12 days. But in addition to that, we had a lot of other work to do. Preparing for a socially distanced on-site classroom was a little bit challenging, and so we started just by taking a lot of furniture out of the building. We wanted to take the desks and tables that we had and spread them to all the edges of the classroom, because doing that gets our children somewhere between 3 and 5 feet apart, depending on how many children are in each class. So that meant a lot of our bulky tables had to go out. We actually rolled up and took out the rugs so that we could move desks forward into that space where teachers are used to bringing their children to the floor. And you'll see in some pictures, you know, the desks are all the way up with just enough space at the front for the teacher to teach. And I wish I had a picture of it because it was quite amazing, all the furniture that ended up in the hallways. And our paras were incredible, moving that furniture out and down to where Kylie's team could come and support us by moving it out of the building. So that was a big thing that was accomplished. We also reorganized a lot of our materials into individual bags so that we would be ready for indoor recess, so that we would have math manipulative kits. I thought at the time I wish I had taken out stock in Ziploc because I think our entire world is in Ziploc bags right now. Our teachers of younger children put center materials into Ziploc bags so that instead of children moving to a place in the room and using common materials, those same kinds of materials are in individual bags that are just in their buckets and ready to go when it's their center time, when a teacher's working with other children. So there were a lot of physical things that we needed to do in the building, but the other big piece that we did was Classroom teachers spent a lot of time just with their teams. They kind of learned from me the things that we wanted to do and the expectations in the building, and then they had to take them and break them down for how is this going to work for our grade level? How should recess look? How will we move through the hallways? Will our children at their developmental age respond to these accommodations? So a big commitment, making sure that they had things ready for their staff. They developed documents that were pages long about how they were going to take everything they usually did and how they would tweak it for this current situation that we're in. So a lot of incredible work went on. I don't know how we would have done it without those days, so I'm really grateful that we had them. So I'm going to pass this on to our teachers because they'll give you a lot more insight on how this has gone for them. After they present, I'm just going to let them kind of roll off and head back to school so that they can help with the supervision and the arrival. We decided, I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of dinner table tradition of roses and thorns that some families have, where you sit down and you talk about the great things that happened to you and a couple of the hard things. But you're our school board, and so I want you to have not just a pretty picture painted for you about how the school day looks, but I wanted them to share with you some of the challenges too. So we're going to kind of use that as our theme as they're presenting, and they'll share some roses and thorns with you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce all of them now. That way I'm not jumping up and down each time, and then we'll go ahead and get started with them. I invited a veteran teacher, Miss Melanie Golubski is here, and she serves on our leadership team, and she also is a member of the District Professional Development Committee, so I thought she'd be a great person to hear from. And then, as I'm listening to board meetings, I've heard you all mention first-year teachers a few times. And so I have invited a first-year teacher to share, and Mrs. Sydney Gibson is a recent graduate of Spring Hill High School. So I thought that would be a nice person for you to hear from. Mrs. Kelly Whitman is going to represent the specialists, and she also, all of our specialists are all over the building this year. Everybody's helping with lunch. Everybody's helping with arrival and dismissal, and so she can give you a little bit of insight into that. And then I've also heard social and emotional concerns brought up quite a few times at board meetings. So I invited Mrs. Amy Markham, our school counselor, to talk to you for just a few minutes. And after they head out, I will come back and share any bits and pieces that didn't get covered in their presentations. And like I said, I have some pictures to show you. So I will go ahead and just turn it over to them.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Golubski. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for letting me speak today. The very first thing I want to lead off with is I had tears in my eyes the first day that students were back in our building. I was very thankful that we could have students back in our building and that we were in person. It was the most exhausting first day I've ever experienced, but it was the best first day. Students are doing a great job of keeping their masks on in our classroom. I can only speak for my classroom and my students, but I have not had any refusals or them wanting to take their masks off constantly. They are doing a great job of keeping their masks on when we ask them to. We are utilizing social distancing for morning greetings, so we figured out some new morning greetings that we can do, an air wave or an air hug or an air high five that we can do to keep those students socially distanced. We have small groups up and running now, so we're utilizing small pie-shaped tables and then our plexiglass to have those small groups. The groups are a little bit smaller, so it's taking us a little bit more time to get through all of those students, but we are getting those small groups in. Our transitions in the classrooms look a little different this year. We don't want students up and moving around as much throughout the classroom, so they have their supplies in a bin or multiple bins. They get those out in the morning, so that way they're not up and moving around like Mrs. Cooper said. We're also handing our Chromebooks out to students each morning and then putting them away at night. Because students are in their seats a little bit more, we're doing a lot more go noodles and movement breaks and things like that throughout the classroom so they can get some movement in. We're utilizing our online platforms more, so IXL, Seesaw, Google Classroom, and ConnectEd. Our students are doing a great job of picking up on those things, and we started off with that right off the bat the first week of school just so they were prepared. Mrs. Teese, Dr. Teese was our wonderful instructional coach. She had a lot of great things, like Mrs. Cooper said, that she trained us in those first couple weeks of school. And I think we are very prepared for the first couple weeks of school. These are some of the thorns that I had. It is difficult to hear our students when they have their masks on. We are constantly repeating ourselves, and students are constantly repeating themselves. They get a little frustrated when they have to repeat themselves, but we are practicing using their speaking voices just so we can hear them a little bit easier. We are sanitizing and cleaning desks in the room constantly, and using or washing our hands and things like that. Students are doing a great job of remembering to do that before we leave the classroom, before we enter the classroom. Our room configuration looks a little bit different, like Mrs. Cooper was saying, that our students are spread out and they're seated at individual desks versus tables. Because of that, we have a little bit less room to move around the classroom, especially for our small group setting. So those are the things I had. Thank you guys for letting me speak this morning.
Thank you.
Hello. Like Ms. Cooper said, I am a Spring Hill graduate, so it is so nice to see some of you again. I know I went to school with a couple of your kiddos. I just wanted to start off by saying that I have the absolute best team on my side. I do have a new teacher on my team as well, and so we kind of go back and forth of asking each other questions about, like, how are you doing this, how are you doing that, should I ask this yet, or should I know that? So we kind of have each other's backs on that. My mentors are amazing. They are so helpful. They answer my questions before I even ask them. My instructional coach, Mrs. Tees, she is very busy, but she still makes sure that I'm heard and I'm helped. And I know Ms. Cooper has my back as well. She's mentioned that multiple times, that she will back me up. Social distancing is actually a lot easier than I imagined. The students are definitely understanding that this is important to keep us safe. It's not just some rule that we made up. It's definitely, it was tricky at first, but they're definitely understanding why we're doing it, and especially at recess when we have our masks off, they're doing the airplane arms, they're doing zombie arms in lines, and so they're doing a really good job with that. I will say strategies that I have learned in college and that I've developed, they're now having to be changed. So the Kagan strategies, like whisper to your partner, we can't really do that just because they are so far apart and we can't understand each other with masks. But reading to a partner, we've discovered that you can read on Seesaw, so you can video yourself reading, and then that goes to me, and I can then comment on those students reading. Taking lunch to the classroom, that was a new experience that I saw everything going wrong, but the students are doing amazing with it. They're going really quickly, and every single day goes a little bit quicker. And I have yet to see a student drop their lunch, which I was imagining that we would have dropping lunches left and right with those little first graders. They're still developing those motor skills, so again, I'm amazed by how well they're doing with that. And then masks, like Ms. Golbatsky said, they're not as bad. Sometimes I don't even notice I'm wearing it. They're doing great with keeping it on and taking them off correctly at recess and clipping them to their shirt or their pants and then putting it back on when we're lining up. However, that brings me to my thorns. Phonics are really hard with the masks, just being able to understand myself, being able to understand them when they're reading their sight words to me. I can't necessarily hear if they're saying it correctly or if they're saying the right letter sound. We did take a spelling test on Friday, and there was a student who, the word was nap with an N, and she wrote map, and so I couldn't tell if it was the letter sound or if she just didn't hear me correctly. So that was definitely hard. And then recess, I will say, is kind of tricky because of the zones. We have to stay in our cohorts, and so one of our zones is just the blacktop, and so students have said multiple times they get really bored, but they have been really creative about different activities they can do. They like to race a lot, and they even got me to race them one time, which was a lot of fun. I will say I am faster than first grader, so. But we are introducing the, soccer balls and basketballs and gonna try and teach them how to use those correctly and safely at recess. I do want to end with a rose, and one of the students our activity was they had to write a sentence with at least one of their sight words. And he wrote a sentence with 2 sight words. He said, "I do not," which was one of them, "want to leave school." And so that meant more to me than I could ever, or he could ever imagine. Just being able to create a safe environment for the student, and I know a lot of the other students feel that way as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
How are you guys this morning? Good. All right.
Doing all
Well,
right.
as I'm sitting here, I love just listening to some of these teachers just talk, because our day is so busy that I don't even see some of these teachers during the day, because we're doing our jobs and making things happen around the building. And man, what a great rose that Sydney just shared, because that was pretty exciting to hear. I will say, this is my 20th year of teaching, so I've been around for a while. And like I think Mel said, was the first day was exhausting, but the joy and just how much my heart was swelling just by seeing the kids get off the bus in the morning, arriving at school, and watching the teachers just do the things they love was probably one of the best days in my 20 years of teaching. So I just want to give a big shout out to our teachers. They are doing amazing work with those kids. I think here's a thorn for you, the hardest part for some of us is high fives and hugs. Man, you just want to hug those kids and love on them. And, we've come up with some creative ways, foot fives or elbow bumps or Wolf Creek waves or something like that, but it's still really hard. Now, I am the PE teacher, and I do get around the building quite a bit, and I am outside quite a bit with our outside learning to provide some of those mass breaks as well. And in my perspective, I am grateful that Mrs. Cooper, we do have if you imagine the blacktop area, if you've been at Wolf Creek or even some of the other schools, we do have quite a bit of field space out there as well, which makes it great to have our zones. I appreciate Mrs. Cooper for giving me kind of my PE zone as well. I have been able to paint large squares for my kids that are socially distanced. That is an area where they can take water breaks or do some exercises, but it's spread out enough to where they can take off their masks and talk to each other and kind of be silly sometimes, which is great. I've also created some lines out there and some waiting spots with some paint. Thankfully, Kylie and his team has supplied some spray paint for me to where I can get out there and paint some of those lines. We can do relay races and different things like that. The other day I was teaching my kids a couple new games. Well, not new games, they're modified. Kickball is obviously a favorite with kids, but makes it a little challenging. However, we were able to incorporate some soccer, some learning our areas for maybe fielding a ball for like baseball, kickball, things like that. They had hula hoops that they had to stand in, and they could only go to the area where the ball was kicked. So if it came towards them, they could come out, and they could only use their feet. So we did have a pitcher. They were able to pitch the ball with their foot, and our bases were cones that they tagged with their feet, and to watch the smiles on the kids' faces, just to kind of bring back some of those games, because that's been kind of a thorn is, Mrs. Whitman, when are we going to play those games? Well, we're working on trying to find a way to, modify that a little bit. So that's one that I was able to do. I know I've also taught my young ones, and I'm teaching my other ones, the rock, paper, scissors hula hoop to where we can distance. And it's kind of a battle to where if you can get across the hula hoop path, winning rock, paper, scissors, then your team gets a point. As I'm listening to them talk about recess, I've actually thought last week, zones are hard. It is hard for the kids to kind of stay in their cohorts, but I am going to go out and in different zones create some of those hula hoop type circles and maybe create that replica of what I would normally do in my class out for the PE or not the PE, but the recess zones, so that gives them an extra opportunity to maybe do something like that. So there's different ideas that keep popping up in our minds and ways that we can kind of help out with some of those maybe thorn areas. In my gym, I will say I have, if you walked into my gym, you would notice it's a big gym, but if you look down the floor, I have markings for a boy and a girl where they would stand to go to the restroom to make sure we're distanced. I have water bottles on the floor to where they can stand to fill up their water bottles if they need. Tape on the floor that is more than, it's probably more like 9 feet apart or so. We do keep our masks on, but we are very distant still. And then just different taped areas along the different perimeter of our gyms, just to provide them, if we do have to do an inside activity, I can say, hey, go to the red taped areas, or go to the purple tape to line up, and just different things like that. So we can accommodate, and it's actually, it's down to a science almost now after several weeks. But let me see here. I will say, I wanted to have some of my coworkers give their thoughts as well, so I did reach out to them. And music is still, doesn't look the same. They're not singing in class, but they do sometimes go outside and are able to sing out there. She's getting pretty creative with how to use instruments in her class. And in fact, I heard Mrs. Dwyer the other day say for their ORL that they brought their maracas today, so I know that they did some kind of creative maraca activity. And she's really teaching some dance lessons, like some folk dances and things like that, to where they can socially distance, but yet still getting in some of that cultural stuff as well. Art, still lots of successes. PTO was able to purchase some watercolors, I believe, for her. And she said kind of her thorn was maybe not being able to use all those mediums that they're used to using, but that time hopefully shall come. Mrs. Preston in the library, I love this. She said her success is delivering books to kids as the Amazon delivery woman. So I don't know, my young kids thought Amazon Prime, my youngest thought Amazon Prime was like our friend during our time. So I think it was kind of funny when she said Amazon delivery woman, because I'm sure lots of kids got some Amazon packages this last several months. Discovery and Learning Lab, they have something really cool going on. It's called Suitcase Adventures, and every Wednesday they are able to do a virtual travel somewhere in the country, and they have visited Australia and Japan, and this week they're doing the ocean, and so they're doing lots of different activities in regards to that. And I know I was walking through and I saw a big map on the wall in the hallway, so kids can even see kind of where those things are, kind of a good geography piece. So that's exciting. I would say some thorns, it's kind of a toss-up. There are thorns, but yet we have to be positive in the way that we look at it. As specials, as a PE teacher, I do see the classes just once a week for 50 minutes. That's not ideal. I'd love to see them more. Because it's hard just to see them once a week. However, we know it's not going to last forever, but we will do whatever we need to do in order to keep things, kids safe and less contact and things like that. I would say, math, like someone said, math are a little hard. You have to speak very loudly, and in a gym, it's a pretty large area to where it's a little bit more challenging. I do know some teachers have kind of purchased their own little amp system, and I think that's helped quite a bit because it can be tiring at the end of the day how loud you are talking. And really, with specials, I would just say I'm grateful for the time that we had at the beginning of the year. We didn't leave our building during the day. We sat outside, we ate lunch together. And honestly, I've probably felt the closest to some of these team members that I have in the past over my years, just because we've spent multiple days eating together, learning about each other, and that created such a strong bond with us and a support system that we rely on each other, we problem solve with each other, and I am forever grateful for that. Technology has been a little bit of a beast at times. I know, I think Phil is working, and Dr. Teese, for some reason, ORL, some of the videos aren't showing for the families, even though we are, we test it at school, we test them on student stuff, but for some reason, I haven't had a problem with it yet, but we're kind of working just through some of those little technical difficulties and trying to figure that out. And I know Mrs. Cooper talked about the bus. I am one of those bus gals on the team, and I watch the kids unload and load every day. And again, we have it kind of down to a science. We grab our littles and we put them in a cafeteria and line them up by their buses, but we also call them by seat numbers. So we call them to where the last seats, like say seats 20 through 24, come out first. And so we have kids, the big kids coming out, their pod doors, the littles coming out, and then when we're ready, we call the next set of kids. And that kind of helps, I feel like, limit some of the passing on the bus, and I think that it's actually worked really quite well. I think that is really all I had to share with you guys this morning, but thank you for the opportunity, and we are extremely happy to be in person and teaching those kids. So, and on that note, I'm going to go. Have a good day.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am Amy Markham, school counselor at Wolf Creek. Thanks for letting me come and share with you today. It is a great privilege of mine to be able to support the students, staff, and families of our great school. My primary role is the social emotional needs of our students. This year has been challenging. Yes, we've had to make adjustments to many aspects of our school day. Despite all that, our students are amazing. I would like to share with you some of my own personal challenges, or rather yet things I've found difficult, as well as the daily joys I get from the time I greet students in the morning until the time I walk them outdoors to the buses. I have the unique position of an opportunity in my position to be able to encounter almost every student throughout the day, whether that's greeting them as they walk through the front doors, or passing them in the hallway, assisting with lunch duty, teaching character lessons, meeting with them individually, or walking them out to the bus. Honestly, for me, missing out on those hugs that our littles are used to has been very difficult. Many of our students find comfort in a hug before heading to class. Not easy, not at all, not for this counselor. However, we have learned to connect through our Wolf Creek way that we do like this, air high fives and air hugs, still connecting. And knowing in my heart one day those morning hugs will be back. Lunch has been another area that has been my concern for safety reasons. Making sure the full class of students are 6 feet apart, unmasked while eating, has made me a little nervous. Safety is so important. Again, have I mentioned how amazing our students are? They have worked hard to learn the new routines and understand the importance of safety. My lunch duty is in a 4th grade class, and compared to my usual lunch duty where I'm in the cafeteria with many students, it's very unusual this year. I'm now in a class with one group of students, making sure that I keep them safe while they're eating. Connecting is still occurring at that time. I get the privilege of being able to walk around and talk to students one-on-one, which is something I don't get to do in the cafeteria. So I found that even though this is a thorn, making sure that they're safe, it's an opportunity to also connect with them. Connection is occurring daily, even in the midst of the safety concerns and the new protocols. I get to spend time talking with them, like I mentioned before. 4th quarter students missed out on regular character lessons, something that is a big part of my job and that I love to do. I've been able to go into every classroom 3 times this first month and provide that emotional support for students and teachers. This is something I'm so thankful I can still provide for them. It brings a sense of normalcy. I hear things like, Mrs. Markham, I'm so glad you're here. Or, when are you coming back? Or my favorite, I've missed you. And as I close, I want you to know I'm still meeting with students who have anxiety, some of that being separation anxiety. This was indeed occurring before. However, this has increased somewhat, and while this has been a challenge, I'm proud to say that I've been working with parents and meeting with students safely in my office, and we're being proactive to meet their needs. Thank you for letting me share today.
So I was kind of listening as our teachers presented, and I know you're interested in how we're doing things differently, so I'm going to touch on just a few more procedures that we've had to change up. Arrival and dismissal, we're doing pretty differently. Arrival, we've added an entrance, which we're really liking. It just kind of calms everything down, honestly, in the building. We bring in 2 grades from that south entrance. Of course, we're taking temperatures, but that really has not proved to be a problem for us. We do it right as the kids pop out of the cars. It really doesn't seem to slow us down too much because it always takes a moment for children to kind of gather that backpack and get themselves together. So that's really going nicely. Dismissal, Phil developed a system for us where we can call cars, and so I send 4 car callers out with tablets, and they our families were all given signs that we made so that we can just go down the line and call their children, and then the teachers bring a screen up in their classrooms, and the children watch, and when their name turns purple, they run out the door. And that way, when they get out there, their car's there. And that's the main difference. It used to be at Wolf Creek, because we're kind of evenly split between bus riders and car riders, we could send all the car riders out, and they'd just kind of gather up, and we'd watch for cars, and we'd be pointing, and they'd go in different ways. But that wasn't the right approach for this year. So now, they come out different doors, and their cars are pretty much right there. It does slow things down, but that was purposeful. We want there to be less gathering of kids who are not in stable cohorts. So Phil described it as a homespun system, but it's actually just working beautifully. We get a little nervous when Google goes down, but so far so good. We've been able to do that, and we have our plan B if we need it. Hallway traffic is one way, and that's not really a problem in our building. It's kind of designed so that can be easily done. You heard Mrs. Whitman mention checkout. We are not having children go and kind of shop for library books, which has really increased Mrs. Preston's workload and her assistant's workload. She has different kinds of checkout sheets depending on the developmental age of the child, and they express what they're interested in, or if there's a book series they like, or if they're ready for the next book on this. Our older kids can actually put books on hold, but then she goes and pulls all those books for the individual children, marks them for them, and then delivers them to the classroom. So that's what you heard Kelly talking about. She arrives with this big cart of books, and they do act like the Wells Fargo wagon, for my age, has arrived, and they are very excited to see that happen. But it does definitely increase the workload. Lunch is kind of a bear. We serve lunch in 26 spaces, and I counted up this weekend so I could share with you. It takes 55 people and 2.5 hours to serve everybody lunch. We cannot safely, socially distance our children far enough apart in their classrooms. So what we have to do is we pull 3 or 4 out of every classroom and put them in a pod. So in addition to our 20 classrooms, we're using the 6 pods, which means we need a lot of supervision. So every single person in the building is doing lunch duty this year. And we're, as I said before, we're all cleaning and sanitizing before those children eat and after they eat, but that's how we're pulling that off. And it's done in very good spirits. And honestly, the children are kind of liking it. I have heard more and more that they like, it's a little quieter and a little more relaxed. It's kind of intense when you have a couple hundred children in a lunchroom. So there's good and bad. I know our carpets are paying a toll. I've mopped quite a bit of chocolate milk out of the kindergarten carpets, but we'll deal with that later. Recess is probably our biggest challenge still. I think everybody intuitively knew that asking children to just stay away from each other at recess was going to be a challenge. But we daily and weekly come up with more things that we think help. One simple example is that on our big playground pieces, we realized if we just let them go up only one way, if you can only go up one way, and then you can go down any of the ways you want, that keeps those children from clustering up and packing up in the middle of the playground equipment. So simple fixes like that, and we didn't have them all on the first day, we just keep developing them. About a week ago, the elementary principals had a meeting, and, you know, who would have ever thought we needed to have this meeting, but we had a meeting where we just talked about playground balls, and how can we get more playground balls out to kids, sanitize them before and after, emphasize, and I think the big, thing that we hung our hats on that made us feel like we could do it safely is we're not having those pickup games of soccer and basketball, but you can practice your soccer and basketball skills. So a child can shoot baskets and another child rebound them for them and then switch places. Kids can practice kicking soccer balls back and forth, and that's bringing some joy back to our recess. So that's probably our biggest challenge at this time. Pretty much everything we do, we've changed, and so I won't go on, but after this is over, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to say and answer some. But I think a picture is worth 1,000 words, as you know, so I've taken a lot of pictures. This slideshow is a little bit long, but I really wanted you to be able to see the day and kind of process, as you look at the pictures, process like what looks different, what looks the same, how is this feeling? And so we'll run through this slide presentation, and then any questions you have, I'd be happy to stay and answer. hard for me not to let that music resolve at the end, but time is precious. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my roses and thorns, and I think, you know, I don't have to talk too much about the roses. I'm hoping they were very evident in the slideshow. The joy is definitely back at Wolf Creek Elementary School, and the energy's back, and the teachers take great purpose from having that back in their classrooms. Probably my biggest personal rose is, and I hope Thank you. Every single night, and we joke about how we're all in bed by 8:30, but I hope it was evident in the slideshow that they are meeting these challenges with enormous commitment and grace, and so that's my biggest rose. I think Michelle would back me up here. The Wolf Creek staff is absolutely the best group, and they always have been, but I think that this year has just tested their mettle even more, and they have risen to the occasion, so that's my biggest rose. In terms of thorns, and I think I'm not alone in this, but the biggest thorn for me is I don't know that we will rest easy this year. We worry every day and every week, and we lay in bed at night and wonder, are we doing enough to keep everybody safe? We know we have medically fragile children in our school. Every school does. We know we have medically fragile staff members in our school, and so that weighs on us. And I'm not alone in that. I know the people above me feel that, and I tell you the teachers feel it too, and they express it to me often. They say to me all the time, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? I want to be sure I'm doing this right. Just last night before I went to bed, I got an email from a teacher saying, can you come talk to my class again? I want to be sure we're doing everything safely. So I think that's the thorn for me, is that this weight that all of us feel who are trying to lead this district, it's not going to go away. We're going to keep battling with it all year long. So, but I also think because of that, we have a really strong sense of community. That's always been a hallmark of Wolf Creek, but I feel like it's even more. And it's not just us, it's our parents too. Every single person is doing something hard, whether it's the kindergarten parent who didn't get to come into school on the first day of school, or the watchdog dads who have had, you know, a string of years of never missing being a watchdog dad, and they're not coming. But I don't think that is building, it's not pulling us apart, it's bringing us together. And we feel it when we load those kids in cars. There was one day, it was raining, I was putting kids in cars, and probably every other parent was saying, you guys are doing amazing, thank you so much, your team is amazing, this school is amazing. So I really think in spite of the challenges, and I know that there is some tension and controversy out in the world, but I really feel like our work at Wolf Creek is bringing everybody together. So those are my personal roses and thorns, and then if you all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them before I go.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming and giving the presentation. I think I would speak for myself, but most of the correspondence I've been getting has not been directed towards the elementary schools, because people are I think pretty satisfied with so much that you guys are doing and the mode of learning. My question for you is, what things do you see as just not sustainable? Like, we can't keep doing it this way because of the staff wearing thin? And then, and I'll just ask a couple and then you can answer however. And then the other thing I was thinking about, seeing so much outside things that are really helping right now. How do you see that changing when the weather changes and you can't get outside?
As to your first question, Sharon, I don't think there's anything we can't sustain. I will tell you, and you saw an example this morning. Normally, I would not give my staff permission to wear Chiefs spirit wear and jeans and tennis shoes to a board meeting to present. But one of the things that I'm doing is looking for little wins. Teachers love wearing their jeans and tennis shoes, disproportionately. I've always joked, if you said, would you like to have lunch or would you like to wear jeans, they would say they wanted to wear jeans. So I don't think we're doing anything that's not sustainable, but it's a lot of work, and we all are going to have to take really good care of our people as we do it, as we go through this year. In terms of having to be inside more, I have two thoughts about that. One is we often have pretty temperate winters, and I think we can probably be tougher about being outside than we ever have before. A class can go outside when it's 40 degrees and still do some work. If they've got their coats on, they can go out for 5 or 10 minutes. So I think we'll be out more than people think. But just as we had a little spell of rain, I think it was the second week of school, and we were in more, our teachers are, and I hope you saw a couple pictures of it in the slideshow, they are really masterful at getting kids moving, even when they can't be outside. I went to observe a first-year teacher who was teaching a lesson on sight words, and she had taken the time to hide sight words and tape them all over the children's desk and under their chairs and on the legs of their desk. And so at one point, they went on a sight word scavenger hunt, but they had to stay in their space. But those little bodies were moving and rolling and tipping upside down. And so it won't be as delightful as these last 2 weeks. They've really felt like a gift, quite frankly, these last 2 weeks. But we will hope for good weather to come and go throughout the winter so it doesn't go too long, and we'll be fine.
So I will say that the mom in me is a little overwhelmed by emotion watching and listening to them, because I know how hard you're working, and I know how hard they're working, and I'm so greatly appreciative, so thank you.
Well, I will just tell you this, send your teachers presents. Yeah. And if people say, what can I do, say, send them a present.
So that was actually my first question. Like, what can we do?
They just need that constant reminder that they're valued. Emails, notes, they are working really hard, Allie.
Okay, yes, so that was my first question. Is there any ideas of what we could do or encourage people to do? So
yeah, all it has to be is a coupon for a Sonic drink, and they'll feel like...
Okay. And I know they've been asked to do the impossible, and you guys have accomplished the impossible. So we all see that and appreciate it. I
will say, when we heard these things and when the 4 principals met for so long, we had that same thought. We thought, I think I'm asking them to do the impossible. And when they all came back the first day and we started presenting some of these restrictions, we felt that way. But what we've learned is it's not, and they're doing it. So it's going really well.
Well, it speaks to who you are and who our teachers are. And we know that there's a giant weight, and so praying that that is soon lifted. I think that was one common theme. What they said is just, we know that this isn't forever, and it's going to end, and I think that gives hope too. I was thrilled to hear that reading tables were back in PE equipment and that stuff too. So is that going better then? Are the teachers feeling more confident with that?
Well, we've always been teaching small groups at Wolf Creek. And we strategically, when we pushed tables out, some of those big bulky tables we sent, but we saved back some of those littler tables so that we could make tinier tables that wouldn't take as much room. I think maybe you could see when teachers are teaching small groups, they're practically doing it underneath their desks and right up against walls. But we kind of designed that from the beginning, and we took those plexiglass shields and we worked, we figured out how they would work on the floor. So that's going great. Now, we don't always start the school year with small groups, but we have always been doing that. And what was the other thing you asked about? Oh, the playground balls. That's new, and so far so good.
Good. Yeah. I think that that's all so important too. So,
and
just to be able to be a kid and just be at recess.
And that's what we're trying to do as principals and as administrators, is just look for where can we give these little wins, I call them, to kids and to teachers, to just kind of lift spirits and let people know that when we can say yes, we're going to say yes. We're only going to say no when we need to.
Yeah. I think, and just to clarify what I meant, just kind of overwhelmed by emotion, I see it with my own child, but just to see what our world has kind of changed too, but still see the joy in their faces and hear the joy from the teachers, it's very hopeful. So they're doing a great job. And they've really thought of creative ways to overcome everything. So I don't really have any other questions other than to say thank you, and please take that back to your staff too.
I appreciate that, I will.
It's really encouraging to see how well it's working, and just those kids being able to be as close to normal as possible, and I don't know, it just made my day, it really did.
Good, good.
Just a couple comments. No, one, and you alluded to it just a minute ago, is people came into this thinking it was impossible, and the reality is it's not impossible because of the mindset that I heard in every single teacher that presented today. And what an amazing, encouraging thing is that mindset is, yeah, it's difficult, it's tough. We've never done this before, and I think Counselor Amy.
Mrs. Markham?
Said something along the lines of, you know, we know this is tough, we know this is difficult, but we just keep knowing that we can overcome this. We keep knowing, and we keep creating, and we keep that positive mindset. Things are difficult. Sometimes in life, things are very difficult, and having just that mindset, they say, what little attitude is a small thing that makes a big difference. And I think that comes from your leadership. It comes from teachers, assistant principals, and teachers that actually step up and say, you know what, we're teaching our children, we're teaching these students how to be resilient. When something appears impossible, it's really not. And so I think just that mindset overall that ran as a theme through everything that was mentioned this morning is just a tremendous thing. It's just very positive. It's very encouraging. And then the second thing is that I keep hearing, we just keep trying. We just keep thinking of new ways. We keep thinking and continuously improving. And just having that, again, comes back to mindset, is just a powerful, positive thing for our district. And I think the most remarkable statement that I heard was that it's actually bringing us closer together. And I think it's absolutely critical that the board, administration, teachers, staff, students, all sense that and feel that and have that connectivity increase rather than decrease, rather than becoming, because it could be a wedge, but you're not allowing it. We refuse to accept that as a wedge, so it's a very positive thing. Thank you very much for coming in, allowing teachers to come in. Let them wear jeans, right? I mean, that's a big thing. Talk about a great little win. Yeah. I think that's a big win, but anyway. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions from the board?
Thank you.
Very good. We really appreciate you coming in. We really appreciate just the flexibility that you've shown in coming out to Hilltop.
Well, thank you, and we'll look forward to being back in our Wolf Creek Library next time.
Yeah, good.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Very good, very positive. Moving on to consent agenda, which includes approval of the consent agenda, approval of the minutes, clerk's report, treasurer's report, payroll and claims, and personnel. Any discussion or comments?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded for approval of the consent agenda. Any final questions or discussion? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to public participation. Candy? No cards received, all right. Moving on to action items. Action item 7.01 is the 2021-2022 district calendar. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, at the last board meeting, we presented the various calendar drafts, and that we are recommending to the board that they accept calendar B.
Any questions or comments on calendar B? They're very similar.
They're very, very
Mr. President, I move that the board accept calendar B for the 2022 school year.
I second the motion to accept calendar B.
Moved and seconded to approve 2021-2022 district calendar B. Any final comments or questions? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing. Yes. Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to action item 7.02, approval of a special Board of Education meeting for October 12th at 6 p.m. for a tour of District Administrative Center and the Educational Support Center. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, anytime we move the change of the start time to a board meeting, we have to get board approval in order to do that, make sure that we give notice to the public. So we're asking the board to approve a special meeting time of 6 p.m. for those tours. And I believe what we'll do is we'll just meet out there at the parking lot, and then you'll have to gear up out there to go in. And then normally we come here, then we gear up and leave. We'll probably just have you go out there, gear up, and then we'll drive back in.
Any discussion? This is an action item.
Mr. President, I move we approve a special board meeting for October 12th at 6 p.m. for a tour of the new facilities.
Second.
It's moved and seconded, move the special Board of Education meeting, start time for 6 p.m. Any final questions or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing. Yes. Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good, thank you. Just moving on to discussion items. Move the remaining morning board meetings this semester. Dr. Burke?
Anytime that we move a board meeting, we have to come and have the board give permission. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss with you is, at this point, should we just move the morning meetings to here until we have a time that we can move back into those buildings? So instead of having to add this as a discussion item, because we will have a morning meeting on the 26th, we'll have one on the 25th of January, and then we'll have another one on the 22nd of February. Something that we thought we should discuss and ask you to consider.
I think it's a good idea to just go ahead and move all of them to Hilltop. I think as we talked about before, we don't want to disrupt their day, especially at this time, trying to keep everybody in masks and 6 feet apart and so on and so forth. So I'd be all for just bringing them here, and I think it worked out very well. The Wolf Creek staff did an excellent job today, and I really appreciated them coming in and letting us know how things are going.
If for some reason we were able to be able to go back into the buildings, we could always change back. And there is an error on here. On the February 22nd meeting, that is an AM meeting instead of a PM meeting at Spring Hill Elementary School.
So we're talking about punting the year, or we're just gonna look again at the end of the semester?
I was asking to go all the way through the 22nd. You can, however you want to do it. If we wanted to just vote on the 26th now, then we would have to come back, because you've got another one on the 25th that's coming up pretty quick.
I think we're going to be in this I couldn't imagine switching out of what we're doing currently for our elementary schools, so I just would rather just keep it consistent, and everybody knows that the morning meetings are here. It's my preference.
Do you know yet when we would be getting into the other building for board meetings?
It says May 10th on here.
Not till May.
I think we'll get in earlier than that. It's one of those deals that's better to underpromise and overdeliver.
I guess whatever, if we had to do any kind of action on it to make sure if we're already meeting over there, that they're over there and not here. So we don't have any more morning meetings after that? Okay.
A lot of things would have to go very well, very quickly.
So you're proposing that, are you recommending or suggesting we just move all of them
All
to
the,
Hilltop?
all the morning meetings to Hilltop.
Okay, I mean, that seems reasonable. We can always move them back, so.
Right.
We have that flexibility. Any other discussion? Moving, or items from Board of Education members for future meetings.
I know this isn't a list topic, but, I mean, kind of is still about, video, microphones. I'm glad we're back here doing it this way. So thank you, Phil, for getting this set up. This has been great.
Yes, thank you.
This evening, I did send out a note last week about, you know, a one or two sentence outcome expectation. So at the beginning, just a heads up, at the beginning of tonight's meeting, I am gonna ask ask each person to just define their outcome, so that we know that we're aligned and we know that once we've agreed on an outcome, we can focus on a solution or a resolution much easier. So that's just a heads up that I'll ask each person to really define one or two sentences what their outcome expectation is this evening. Any other items from Board of Education members for future meetings? Work calendar, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, the action plans will be brought up at a future meeting. Teacher of the Year banquet, obviously you know that was postponed. And then the crisis plans, we'll be bringing the crisis plans probably in October. September's usually a pretty light month. We're pretty busy on August, and then September actually is usually pretty light.
Okay, we do need an executive session.
Mr. President, I move the board recess into executive session to discuss potential properties for a new school pursuant to the exception for preliminary discussion of the acquisition of real property in Tacoma. Those to be in session include Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and administrators as requested. The session to begin at 8:15, with the open meeting resuming at no later than 8:30 at this place.
Second.
It's moved to second to move to executive session for the purpose of conducting preliminary discussions for the acquisition of real property. Candy, please collect the vote.
Start with Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike.
Yes,
Approved.
thank you.
So we're gonna ask to clear the room unless you're part of this. Yeah,
We're gonna just do it right here.
we're gonna just do it right here. This won't take very long.
Do we have to do anything with it? No. So, just move to adjourn?
Move.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
See y'all tonight. I need to still do that deal for our October